Hello, I'm Emma Knight, Chief Executive of the National Governance Association. Thank you so much for joining me today for an introduction to good governance. And it really is going to be an introduction because I've only got half an hour. So if you've heard me talk about this again, I'm sorry, I probably will be repeating myself. So just to explain, if you haven't been to one of our webinars before, they are really in the form of lectures, not our seminars or networking opportunities. Those are our other NGA events, and they are free to our members. So today, if you've got any questions or comments, do put them in the chat function and we will send you answers after the webinar. But I'm afraid I can't do it quite at the same time now. You will be sent the slides plus links to various resources that I'm going to mention. And of course, this is being recorded and it will be made available shortly after the session. And please do share it with others, particularly those you know who are new to school or trust governance. But I always like to start with a real thank you for what you're doing for your pupils and your community when you govern. We absolutely know here at NGA just how much care and time and commitment this volunteering role takes. And because you're often behind closed doors, making sure that things are going well, you don't always get the recognition that you deserve. So thank you. And thank you for giving up another half hour of your time to talk about or listen to good governance. So just starting, first of all, what is governance? So this is the definition we use that we have adopted from an organization, international organization, and that's something that NGA does. We really extend our expertise by looking at what happens in other sectors and also in other countries. So governance determines who has the power, who makes the decisions, how other players make their voices heard, and how account is rendered. So you really are in a powerful position, making decisions, listening to other people and taking their views into account. And I think sometimes the importance of that role isn't given the significance that it should have. And sometimes indeed, even by those who govern, you have more that you can determine than perhaps you realize. So here is our I was about to say temple. We started to call it temple in good governance. I don't quite know whether that's right, but these are the constituents of good governance. And they build upon a joint understanding of organizational mission and values. So that is what I'm going to start with, because it really binds all of you together who are making those decisions, both those of you that are volunteering, sometimes now called non-executives, and those that are paid to lead the organization. So let's look at how you move from those mission statements, those high-minded statements, to actually getting results for your pupils. So you really need to start with your organization's values, which need to permeate all of this strategic work and the delivery work of the staff. Now, if you're a conference attender, no doubt you will have heard the expression, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But what in fact that neglects is the second part of that phrase, which is a strategy that is at odds with a company's culture is doomed. So what we need is both a strategy and a culture that work well together. And those two things need to be co-created. I'm not sure I like that word, but I haven't been able to find a better one, by the board and senior leaders. Together, you need to come up with both the strategy and the culture. But it's really your job then, as the board, to actually test and ensure that culture is healthy. Because we can put some lovely words on a piece of paper, on our mission statement and our vision statement, but actually it's the way in which that organization running is the culture as you say it should be. And then secondly, to actually create a strategy that works by turning that vision into reality. I'm not going to be talking about that at any length today at all. We in fact have another webinar from last term at the point when we published the Being Strategic, a guide for governing boards and school leaders. So please have a download of that document and a listen to that webinar. You may remember in that governance graphic, as well as building on the mission and the values and the healthy culture, there was also a reference to behaviours and diversity. So it's the way in which those discussions that are had at the governing board are so incredibly important to good governance, because that is, after all, what you are doing. You're making decisions after really examining the information, debating the information, and coming up together collectively with a decision. Because many heads are better than one. And when we say diversity, we don't simply mean in terms of a tick box. We're not just talking about race and age, although some of you who know NGA will say, actually, Emma, you do talk an awful lot about improving the number of Black, Asian and minority ethnic volunteers and improving the number of volunteers under the age of 40. True, but that's because we want a mix of people. That's not because we think those of us like me who are well over 40 and white and middle class shouldn't be governing. We absolutely, I hope, have a lot to offer, but it's about making sure that not everybody comes to the board with the same experience, with the same background, because you really want to have people throwing into the discussion ideas that the rest of you wouldn't necessarily have thought about. So there are resources that should help you look at that diversity. Good behaviours on board, again, is a subject that we write about at length in various places. We have guidance on our knowledge centre, and indeed in our chair's handbook, I've written really quite a long section about what a healthy dynamic looks like, with everybody contributing and playing their part, and with meetings running to time but still allowing the important things to be discussed. But I need to move on now to those 3 pillars of good governance. So let's start with the green one, the framework for ethical leadership, which is helping us maintain those decisions being made in concert with the Nolan principles of public life, which are on the left-hand side, and then the virtues that leaders in education, and that includes you, by the way, that does include governing boards, need to personify if they want to be making decisions in an ethical fashion. So yes, we've chosen green. I still have one of the A5 handouts. that we produced when the Commission 2 years ago developed the framework for ethical leadership, and we were recruiting pathfinders. And as it happens, tomorrow we publish our 2-year-on Pathfinder report, which shows that schools and trusts around the country have really taken this to their heart and have used it in order to help their decision-making processes. So please do have a look at that. Clearly, you're going to say to me, but hang on, Emma, we govern in order to ensure that the children and young people in our care, in our schools, get the best possible education that they can. We are making decisions in their best interest. But the difficult thing is knowing when you are doing that, why you are doing that. Are all the interests of the children the same all of the time? What if you've got competing interests? And particularly, sometimes the interest of the institution itself begins to take priority. And that's when you need to go back to your mission, because your mission will be to deliver good education, to ensure the educational welfare of your pupils. That needs to be absolutely at the heart of what you are doing, but also your school leaders. And we had a number of issues, which I don't have time to go through today, but where it became obvious that the way in which the education system was sort of configured, was monitored, wasn't necessarily giving us always the ethical decision. And just two very particular points to boards. Do make sure that you are being brave enough to really look at both any what's called related party transactions, any payments that are being made to those who might have an interest in the school or the trust, and also the remuneration of your school leader, of your executive. Try and avoid conflicts of interest if you possibly can. And lastly, make sure that you do have a code of conduct. We know that from our survey work that 85% of you do, but not everybody necessarily signs it year in, year out and remembers that you've got a code of conduct there. And the role of the chair is absolutely crucial in making sure that the conduct of the board is as you want it to be. So moving on, then I'm going to look at that accountability pillar now. That's one which we think has not been talked about enough in schools and trusts in relation to governance. When one says accountability for schools, often those in charge will think Ofsted, they'll think performance tables. They won't necessarily think governing boards and being accountable to their communities. So if you look in the governance handbook for the 3 core functions, you will not find that last one that NGA has added. We believe there's a 4th core function that goes back to that definition I used at the beginning of holding to account and making sure that voices are heard. So we've added in a 4th core function of boards, which is to ensure decisions take into account the views and experiences of stakeholders, pupils, parents, staff, and the community. And I know that's very easy for me to put on a PowerPoint slide. What does that actually mean that you need to do? Well, we know, again, from our annual survey, that you are gathering views from stakeholders in a whole range of ways, from holding community-wide events, talking very broadly with people in the community, to undertaking surveys, surveys of staff, surveys of pupils, surveys of parents. But I think you can see from that slide that actually, although it's been increasing over the last couple of years, it's perhaps still not as high as it should be. Not quite 70% of boards are looking at results from staff surveys and pupil surveys. And really, as an employer, or acting in place of an employer in the maintained school, you absolutely need to make sure you are getting information from your staff. And never more so than now, surely, in COVID, when we know that our staff are incredibly hard pressed, providing education both remotely, but also for those pupils who are in the classroom. So it may be that actually right now a survey is absolutely not the right way to go, but think of other ways of making sure you understand how your staff are feeling as a result of the additional workload they have at the moment, and indeed the anxieties that we're all dealing with at the moment. So there are absolutely other ways of pulling that information in, whether it's through informal conversations, through focus groups, through a consultation event, through your links. Many of you will have links to particular members of staff. That will give you a feel about the climate in the school right now. It's also incredibly important that you do get information from different sources. It can't all come to you through school leadership. So ensuring a staff voice is listened to is important. Similarly, pupils. Again, the numbers who are engaging with pupils are going up a little bit, but not very much. And if you remember the Ofsted framework pre-COVID, it was very much moving to talking to pupils, listening to pupils as part of their evidence base. And I think that's giving confidence to governors to do the same. So half of you have met or observed a pupil council. I really hope that that will increase over the coming year, and think of other ways of engaging with your pupils. So then that third pillar in the middle there, effective governance, and our 8 elements. We came up with these several years ago after looking at governance across a range of sectors, and actually they still hold true now. And these 8 elements, we can talk about any one of them for a whole day, and clearly I'm not going to do that in the remaining minutes I have, but there are lots of resources on our website about each of those. But I just want to pick up a couple of those which are I think particularly timely at the moment, but also to point out this is very much all around people, the right people being around the table, people who have the time, the inclination, the willingness to understand their roles and responsibilities. People like you who are coming to events like this to really understand, so what are our roles and responsibilities? The chair, when I'm asked which of those 8 elements is the most important, I really think it is having a good chair, or I should say perhaps good chairs, because we are in the business of promoting co-chairing, partly because, again, of the time that chairing does require. Not everybody is able to give that amount of time on their own. And also professional clerking, having that advisor for the board, making sure that you as volunteers don't end up doing administrative tasks, but actually you do need somebody who can say to you, hang on, actually there is guidance around how to do this well, or there are regulations about this particular point. You don't need to, or you shouldn't need to, spend your evenings searching the web for the latest advice. The first person you turn to is your clerk. And then building those relationships on trust, that's between the board, but also obviously between the board and senior leaders. And I'm going to come back to that very quickly in a moment. But knowing what you'll govern is absolutely crucial to then being able to ask the questions about what you govern. And clearly at the moment you're doing that virtually, but actually most of the monitoring, most of the learning about the organization can be done via remote means. I know it has its shortcomings. I would much rather be seeing you and being able to interact with you, ask you questions, have people put their hands up. So I absolutely understand the limits of not being able to visit the school. But there are still really good ways that you can continue making sure you know what is happening in your school. And when you understand that, then asking those challenging questions. I also realized that during COVID times, it has been even more important that you get that balance between support and challenge right. I know you have been supporting your school leaders intensively, and I hope, but proportionately over the last couple of terms. But at the same time, we can't relinquish entirely that need also to hold to account, to ask the challenging questions, but it's how you ask those. Asking questions well is possibly the most important skill of governance. And then following on from those answers, then having those courageous conversations in the interests of children and young people. I thought it was really important that in our 8 elements, that pupils do get a look in somewhere. So I just wanted to remind you, if you don't know already, that we can recruit to boards virtually as well. I'm sure many of you have been doing that over the past few months, but please do use the resources that are available out there for you, such as Inspiring Governance. Those that are matched through Inspiring Governance currently are receiving 12 months free support from us, and that includes our e-learning learning link, which has a substantial induction modules there. I also wanted to talk a little bit about that role of relationships with the senior leaders, because that is incredibly important to making sure that governance happens well, not cozy, but actually professional and with respect on both sides of the table. Actually, I don't really like saying both sides of the table. I shouldn't have used that expression. It sort of goes against that idea of co-constructing things, working together for that mission. So in the same spirit in which we hope that you are working with your senior leaders, we also try to work with the national organisations who represent both business leaders, ISBL, but also head teachers, ASCL and AHT. And those of you that don't know that document, please do have a look at some of those expectations on each other. We want to make 2021 the year of school improvement through developing our people, through CPD. Because actually, often school improvement has been caught up with an awful lot of initiatives, which we don't always know what impact they're having. Do they last, or are they flavour of this particular year and actually won't exist in 3 or 4 or 5 years' time? Whereas actually the people that we employ in school, they are the ones that are really going to make the difference to the education that pupils receive. So if we're wanting to improve that the teaching and learning that's experienced, improve the mental well-being of pupils, that all needs to be done via improvement for the staff. And I don't think perhaps that we've been talking enough about that as NGA over the past decade. So we're really going to have a go this year to do that. Many of you will be involved in appraising your senior leaders. Do you absolutely make development the heart of that conversation? We were really pleased that governance was wrapped around the head teacher standards that were published last October. And those standards can be used to think about what development your head teachers need. And what our survey work tells us is that often the support that they need as a relatively new head, or indeed actually as a CEO of a multi-academy trust, is about that bottom domain there, organizational effectiveness. It's about management, HR, finance, school improvement, partnerships, working with parents as well, but particularly finance and HR. So really have a think about what it is that your head teachers need in order to do their job better. I know you are concerned about the well-being of your staff and particularly your leaders. We have had that feedback in absolute droves over the last 2 terms. And so the team has developed, along with partners, actually, in the National Wellbeing Partnership, a resource which is a conversation beginner on well-being. When it was first mooted to me, I thought, oh dear, is this going to be a toolkit with a checklist? That's not what we need, and it absolutely isn't. It's about having those conversations in a constructive way about well-being, and I have to say it's been really well received. So again, please do spread that far and wide. It's available to people who are not NGA members. We really want it to be used to have those conversations. Because if you go back to the ethical, effective, and accountable, what is more important than being an ethical employer that is both developing staff but also ensuring the staff's well-being? So just for my last minute, I wanted to move from good governance to outstanding governance. When we were deciding the webinar topic for this month, we knew we were going to be launching our Outstanding Governance Awards, and we wondered whether we should talk about this as being outstanding governance rather than good governance, as I have called it over the years. But actually, I think good governance is what we're absolutely all aspiring to, whatever we govern. Whereas what we're looking for here in the awards are those governing boards who have gone that step further. And I know there will be people in this audience who absolutely have done that. We're asked all the time as NGA, oh, it'd be really good to see what outstanding looks like. It would be really good to have some case studies that we could have a look at and see whether we could do the same. Well, by the way, we don't use outstanding governance because Ofsted uses it. Our definitions of outstanding governance are there on our website in the forms. We have been incredibly careful this time, well, always actually, but particularly this time because of COVID, to try and make this application process as simple as we can, because we know you don't have lots of time and bandwidth to be filling in complicated applications. We do have a number of different categories for single schools, for federations, for multi-academy trust. and also one looking just at outstanding vision and strategy, because that is an area where our members say they would like to see some more good examples of those to learn from. So thank you very much for joining me today. I do hope that some of those resources I've signposted you to will be helpful, but please do stay in touch, and good luck with your governing in what we know is a really difficult time. I hope that the newsletters each Friday from NGA keep you up to date. But if there are questions we're not answering, please do contact me or my team. We really do want to hear from governors and trustees from around the country, and in fact we need to make sure that we are producing guidance and information and e-learning that meets your needs. So thank you very much and goodbye.